Hey there, what up? This is Pseudo, and we'll be watching the balance stream today. There'll be light commentary, don't worry, it'll still serve us as a VOD. But it starts off in 3 minutes, so grab your kids, hide your wife. Let's go, chat.
All right, welcome back to another Guild Wars 2 balance patch preview.
They killed Cal.
I am, of course, Roy, and I am joined today by none other than Taylor Brooks.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
Just before we get started, we should address the elephant in the room, or rather the elephant that's not in the room, I suppose, which is that we are short a person today. Cal is not here. And a little bit of a funny story, actually. So last week, Taylor came to the team, and he said, guys, I've been thinking hard, and I came up with a great idea to fix the game. We're going to delete Warrior. And Cal was not very happy with this.
Perfect.
And
finally
so
did
he
it.
said no, and Taylor body slammed him 6 feet through a steel cage where he plummeted through a table. And the last we saw of him was him walking off, muttering, "Kids these days." So he's not going to be with us today on this stream, but there you go. Anyways,
Warrior
Taylor,
is getting
how's
deleted.
it going today? How you doing?
You know, pretty good. Happy to be here. You know, sad we can't have our leader, our linchpin, the shining light in the darkness, be here with us.
Shining light in the darkness,
you know,
indeed.
Nonetheless, we will persevere.
I wonder what the real reason is.
Very good. Very good indeed. No, in all seriousness, Cal is just on vacation today, so he could not make the stream before we let the rumor mill go too far. But yeah, so he will be back with the next stream. No worries, nothing too crazy there. And yeah, we'll be reunited as the Three Musketeers yet again. But today you are stuck with just Taylor and I. We'll be running you through the patch notes for the June balance patch. And as always, the patch notes will be posted on the forums at the end of this stream. Once it is concluded. Once again, and as always, please give us your feedback on the forums, on Reddit, wherever it is that you choose to give us your feedback. We will be looking. We have a long weekend, Memorial Day. Monday's off, so we got a lot of time to read feedback, a lot of extra time. But yeah, I think we can just get right into it. Get started with the patch notes.
Hopefully they still delete warrior, right? That's sarcasm.
First up, we got some general sort of changes, sort of overall changes. Nothing, not a class-specific change. We got a couple of amulets that are going to be added to the PvP build panel there. Heretics and Tyrants amulets. You can read those and have some new stat combos there. Rune of the Ogre and Rune of Tormented are also going to be added to the PvP build panel. Taunt, we're going to be increasing the Defiance damage from 75 to 100, a little bit stronger there against break bars. And Frost Aura, this is going to be a World of World specific change, but it is still sort of a general note overall, is going to have its chill duration reduced from 2 seconds to 1 second. Again, that's going to be World versus World only.
Interesting.
Those are just sort of some general changes there overall for the game mode. But first off, we're going to start off with Warrior, which we are not actually going to be deleting from the game.
Tragic.
So we've got some support Warrior buffs here. We've got some improvements to the strength trait line, specifically in the competitive game modes, and we've got some defensive utility buffs, mostly in the PvE game modes. So here we just got kind of some general warrior changes, looking at kind of improving some usability there for some banners. Again, we're trying to make support warrior a little bit stronger, especially after we've got staff coming into the game and being a pretty strong weapon. Pretty strong archetype there for warrior, so we're going to be seeing a lot of changes that are sort of going towards that. Also looking at reducing some cooldowns for some stance skills. Specifically, those are going to be PvE only. Once again, a couple more similar sort of notes there. Frenzy going to have its cooldown reduced. Got some other utility skills that are having some cooldown reductions in PvE. And again, another little banner update there. Here's some of the strength notes.
I should be pausing this.
Again, kind of focusing on making strength warrior a little bit more of a competitive option for some competitive modes. Competitive twice, like to see that. Reckless dodge, restorative strength, might makes right, shrug it off. Obviously going to be aimed a little bit more again at that sort of support warrior archetype that we were talking about a little bit. And moving away from the general warrior changes, halfway through this slide, again, top changes there are going to be a little bit more for that support warrior side. Big change here, martial cadence is going to be recharging soldiers' focus on weapon swaps. And also going to be causing it to remove conditions from allies. We're going to be reducing the quickness duration down a little bit in the competitive modes, though. Obviously, just as we're buffing this trait up pretty significantly, we're going to be reducing some of that quickness duration, that quickness application. And then heightened focus in the discipline line is going to be getting a little bit more value there for some support.
Wow, that's a really big buff from
warriors there.
Or for Spellbreaker.
And then we look at the Spellbreaker trait improvements. We're just kind of looking at some of the meditation skills,
utility skill,
trying to get them a little bit stronger, get a little bit more usability for those. And Thief, that's going to be it for Warrior. So Taylor, if you want to talk about some of the Thief changes we've got going on.
Yeah, so Thief, we're taking a look at Venoms as far as their usability goes when you're in a group, because Venoms are pretty good right now on their own, but the problem starts when you have multiple Thieves in a group. Right now, they only stack to the amount that one use gives. And so if you have multiple that are using on the same cooldown timer, it gets really awkward. You drop damage, and it feels bad. So we're going to try and address that. As well, we have some other buffs to things in PvE that aren't really that great right now and could use some help.
All right.
So this first page is just a bunch of sword buffs in PvE. We're going to be realistic and know that these are good. They're not going to make sword any meta DPS weapon or anything, but it should feel a lot better to use in open world and be an option for the people that really want to use sword. We see that sword is really strong and competitive, so we didn't want to change any key mechanics to it, but we did want to just try and buff up the things it had.
All right.
They need a warrior, thief, and NG dev.
And this kind of goes along. Same thing with some of the pistol skills.
Load
not really
buffs. Loving it.
Yeah.
Load's getting buffed.
Not really as great as it could be, so we're kind of bumping it up a bit. Obviously, not expecting this to be a huge change, but why not? Could be better. And Scale Venom is the first Venom change you see. They're all going to follow the same pattern, basically, where they're getting their stack cap increase so that you can play Venoms in a group of other Thieves and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, and yeah, so this is just going to be the first Venom we're seeing. We just couldn't fit them all on the same page because there's a lot of Venoms. And so sort of similar changes there for the rest of them, which we'll be showing here. Take a quick look. Also, I apologize for zooming through the warrior changes a little bit quickly there. I just didn't want to make Taylor too angry by staying on warrior for too long, but we'll take a little bit of a breather. We'll slow down a little bit. I'm just very excited. I'm pumped up this morning. That's my bad. We'll slow things down for the rest of it. We'll have a nice comfy stream for the rest of it.
Yeah, you gotta zoom through warrior and then stop.
Having to cover for Cal.
That's it, basically. Yeah. I do get anxious when Cal is not around. It's true. It's known. Moving off of the Venoms, got some mostly just cooldown reductions in PvE for a lot of utility skills.
Yep, so a big theme you're going to be seeing during this patch slot in Warrior, you're seeing it here, you're going to see for the other professions, is we took a pretty decent pass on a lot of the defensive cooldowns for PvE and tried to normalize their cooldowns to around the 25-20 second range, depending on what they are. Because a lot of skills had really high cooldowns for PvE, kind of due to back when the game, all of the modes were combined in their balance, and they had to have higher cooldowns for the competitive modes. Now that it's fully split, don't really need that, and so we did a bigger pass to try and, you know, if you take one defensive utility, it should feel pretty good in open world and even environments that you just want your build to be more survivable, and you can drop some damage if you're usually greeting for 3 offensive utilities. Now you can take some defense, and it'll be pretty efficient for that one slot. And then at the bottom here, we see Shadow Portal. It's getting its uses increased from 5 to 10, 10 being a whole squad or in PvE content. Yay. 5 was kind of bad if you can only do half your squad when a Mesmer and Scourge can do everyone. So now you can do everyone. So, yeah.
More thieves, more often. What's not to love?
This is all kind of the same, increasing for PvE some defensive options. You see the acrobatics line, some daredevil defensive options getting buffed. So nothing big there.
Well, but we are buffing pumping up, and that's pretty important to call out.
Pumping up.
Because
that's pretty good.
Who doesn't love pumping up? Am I right?
Get pumped.
Yeah, I got some Deadeye Spectre changes there. A little bit of a nice bump there for Neil in PvE. And then Shadow Sap. Again, going to be a little bit, or not literally a little bit, going to be 50% stronger now in terms of its splash effectiveness in PvE. And Well of Silence going to be having its cooldown reduced as well for PvE.
They are 10 minutes into this.
All right, moving on to Revenant. That's going to wrap it up for Thief. We've got some Power Renegade buffs. We obviously had a pretty big change to Renegade in the last major patch. With the collar rework, we're looking at just kind of getting some Power Renegade buffs in general, as we still haven't really seen it, fall into favor anywhere. And then we're looking at making Herald a little bit stronger, specifically in PvP. It's sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit, not bad or anything, but definitely getting overshadowed by some of the other Revenant specializations like Vindicator and just other classes in general that sort of match its playstyle. So not a lot of core Revenant specific things.
I'm not seeing a lot of like skill reworks in this at all.
On this first page as well, but here you can see some of these changes that we're making to try and make Herald a little bit stronger in PvP. And again, these are going to be PvP focused changes, except for Shiny Aspects, which is going to be in all game modes, having its base healing increased, as well as Vicious Reprisal going to be going up a little bit there in World vs. World and PvP. Again, some Renegade buffs.
Yeah, the big thing is that Revenant's performing pretty well everywhere in PvE, so not a lot for it there as far as a class whole. And then as far as it goes in competitive modes, we're focusing on Herald. You saw that we're increasing the effectiveness of a lot of the Invocation Grandmasters. They were nerfed down a lot, and Song of the Mist was really the only option people took, so we're trying to make the other Grandmasters more appealing. We're being pretty careful with Charge Mist buffs. We've seen that, when you give energy to Revenants, really interesting things can happen. So trying to keep the buff small. Same thing with Vicious Reprisal. Retribution isn't really taking much, so we're giving it a very small buff to see if people are interested in taking it. But, going hard on the buffs, we're being pretty wary of what a bunker rev could become with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the Renegade specific changes. Again, just trying to give a little bit more power to Power Renegade. So we're going to be bumping up some of the numbers there. Obviously, Soul Cleave Summit not going to be a necessarily power-specific change, but the base healing going to be going up. Pardon me. Energy cost going to be going down for Ice Razor's Ire for PvP only. Citadel Bombardment going to be getting just a little bit better usability and some better damage numbers there as well. Sorry, energy numbers there, energy cost numbers there. And then Heroic Command, again, energy cost going to be going down, PvP focus only.
Yeah, Citadel Bombardment change is going to be pretty decent for everywhere. Its spread is now being matched to be pretty similar to Grenade Barrage. Currently, if you use the skill on a standing still target, you'll be lucky to have like 3 of the missiles hit them. But now with this spread, basically all of them will hit it. Like if you use it on a standing golem, you get pretty much all of them. That's why the damage reduced so much in competitive modes. We didn't touch it in PvE because, you know, some of the hitboxes can get so big, they're hitting all of it anyways, but this should make the skill a lot more consistent. And so we'll be keeping our eye on it, but hopefully it feels a lot better to use.
Absolutely.
That's boring, but cool.
A couple more Renegade specific changes here.
Yeah, so the bigger one for PvE is All for One is becoming a power damage trait, basically. It's going to give you a damage bonus buff for a bit of time when you use a Renegade skill. So the idea is that you want to be swapping through your Renegade and your Shiro or whatever your other stance is going to be, and try and keep that up to try and get a bit more sustained damage. We know that Renegade's burst is pretty decent, as well as the Citadel Bombardment will also help it. So we wanted this to be more of a sustained damage trait to help it outside of fractals, where we know that's like the one
last bullet.
The one place it's played. Absolutely. And also Vindication, we're changing its bonus. It kind of had to get gutted out of existence for PvP, where it was like getting you might for each Call of Fervor, and Call of Fervor just like falls off of trees, so it was like 25 might perma, and so we had to nerf it, and now it was useless. So now I'm making it something that's not useless. It's going to give you some outgoing lifesteal, basically. So if you want a more sustaining trait, then this is one you take. So yeah.
There we go. All right, moving on to Taylor's favorite class. Certainly his favorite green class anyways, Ranger. So we're looking at some skills that we're not really seeing a lot of use in
Ranger gets skill
game
reworks
modes across the whole game. Trying to buff some of those up. We're also looking at some weapons that we don't see getting quite as much use across the game either.
Right. No one uses longbow on Ranger. Literally nobody has ever used a longbow on Ranger.
Yep. The bows were falling behind. Huge flavor fail. Unacceptable. So we need to buff them.
And that's fair.
So we're seeing short bows being tweaked a bit more towards competitive. It's not really ever seen. Never seen used, but compared to the other condition options, it really isn't competitive. And so we're trying to buff it up there. For PvE, the one that might be interesting is Crippling Shot that bleeds inflicted by your pet now that you use your condition damage. So its use on like an Untamed or a Druid will be the same as if you're a Soul Beast. And we're also seeing Long Range Shot and Rapid Fire be increased in their damage to be more sustained damage. The only time people really used Longbow in like instance PvE content was like a precast or to set up their burst with Barrage. So now hopefully the damage from it just sustain wise should be pretty decent.
Absolutely. A couple of the utility skills we mentioned, getting some usability improvements, or not really usability improvements, but just some buffs. Again, kind of focusing on some skills that we don't really see being taken a lot. Most of these are going to be PvE only. Strength of the Pack, getting a little bit of a bump up there for its might duration in World vs. World and PvP.
Short bow things.
Mostly just to try and give Rangers a little bit more options.
They did, Marshall. They did it in about 3 minutes at the start of the presentation. I'm not kidding about that.
There. Some might generation for any of the builds that we're seeing pop up in World vs. World and PvP.
Yep. And then this slide, Lead the Winds is getting a like mini rework where it's going to change how it gives you the boons. Before it would only give you the boons if you strike a target beyond 1200 range, which is like really rare in a lot of cases, and it felt inconsistent. So now it gives you quickness and swiftness when you use point blank shot, which feels a lot better. You can combo point blank shot into rapid fire or barrage or channels, so you have quickness for them. So maybe this trait sees use. It has a lot of competition with the other 2 slots, but if you want to be a bow ranger, then hopefully this feels better. And then Juvenile Aether Hunter. These are a lot of words to say we hopefully made it feel better to use. It had some pretty long aftercasts and weirdness to it. So we're shifting it and maybe also hopefully making the Soul Beast version of it feel better, kind of increasing that leyline vortex to feel more like a fire overload.
I want to believe
where you hit them
too,
a lot of times. So yeah, so hopefully pet feels better to use.
Absolutely. It actually had the most impactful PvP stuff that I've seen so far, Marshall. These are really underwhelming changes for just about every class.
Some Soul Beast changes here
so far. They just blazed through
issues, for a couple of pet skills, and then a little bit of a nerf to Prelude Lash in the competitive game mode, just lowering that power coefficient down, and another usability or utility skill that we're not really seeing used quite as often in PvE, having its cooldown reduced. Therefore, doing like stance.
Yep.
Untamed.
So these are some untamed things. The Unleash pet, we got a lot of feedback that people don't like seeing their pet be green all the time when they play Untamed. And so we are changing it so Unleash pet's visual effect will now fade over time, kind of like it does on you. So it'll become green and then back to normal. So if you like having your pet unleashed but don't like it being green, hooray. Toxic Shot, this kind of rolls back into Shortbow, how we were talking about. It's Untamed Ambush was kind of holding it back a decent amount from use. So we're increasing its usability and also a bit of its damage. Not by a whole lot, but hopefully its skill feels a lot better to use.
Could I get maybe like a little bit more of an enthusiastic hooray? Taylor?
Yay!
That was yay, not hooray. I want the whole word.
Take what you can get, man.
Where's Cal? All right. Moving off of Taylor's favorite green class to my favorite green class, Necromancer. We're going to be looking at World versus World. I love Necro. I never had any issues with Necro. Looking at World versus World buffs for Sword specifically. We've, touched it a little bit since, the initial launch of the Sword for Necro, but we're still not really seeing it have the success that we want it to in World versus World. So we're going to be hopefully bumping it up to a place where it's going to be a little bit more competitive with things like Scepter, things like Axe, depending on
literally every Necro I run into for World versus World is running Sword.
Survivability improvements for Harbinger.
Oh, because Maddie, it does
patch as well. But here, of course, we've got some
the
sword
same
skills.
Thing.
Gorman dies. What a great name that skill is. Glad to see that one return.
Wonder who named it.
Wonder who named it. So that's just going to have its power coefficient going up. And then we're going to be changing how the leap skill, the 3 skill, Path of Gluttony works a little bit. So it's the initial hit is now going to corrupt a boon instead of having to wait for that flip over, the second charge of that leap to get the boon removal. So you have a little bit more boon removal up front. Again, hopefully to try to make that a little bit more competitive with things like Axe 3, which is already going to be corrupting boons on hit there. And then of course, lowering the number of boons to reflect that for PvE and PvP, where it's going to be matching the number that already was there for World versus World. So getting some more boon rip up front for players, especially in World versus World, is going to be pretty important. That's obviously something that Necromancer plays around a lot, and so we're going to be hopefully seeing that feel a lot better. And then, of course, power coefficient up for Satiate in World versus World. Feast of Corruption is going to have a little bit of a buff for PvP as well. Just getting Scepter hopefully feeling a little bit better for some Necro builds.
Are functionality changes.
So boons up from one, boons corrupted up from 1 to 2. And of course, the cooldown is going to be going up a little bit alongside that as well, since it'll be a lot stronger.
Yep, we wanted to see Scepter get buffed a bit after Weapon Master training. Pistol kind of overshadowed everything. And so we're trying to increase what Scepter wants to do, hit that big 3 skill, get 2 corrupts. Increasing the cooldown just a tad. Obviously, this isn't like a super big cooldown increase, but we wanted to, since it's 2, if you want to use it twice per Scepter loop, probably have to wait a bit on the weapon.
All right. Some more changes.
We did actually get a
little bit of a common trend here.
Last time.
Cooldown reductions for PvE, trying to make some of these utility skills that we don't really see as often across classes a little bit more competitive. So a bunch of those going to be getting cooldown reductions for PvE, and a little bit of a QL buff there for Spectral Ring in PvE. It's now going to perform an initial strike that deals Defiance bar damage for PvE.
Yeah, Spectral Ring is a change you're going to see on Gardien and Elementalist when we get to those skills. Basically, all of those skills that CC'd someone when they walked through it were completely useless in PvE when the boss stands still. So now we're changing all of them. So PvE only, you'll do a strike when you set it down, and anything on the wall or inside the ring will get CC'd when you use it.
Yeah, and it's pretty important to note that is obviously going to be PvE only, since a lot of those skills are already very strong and used a lot in World versus World and PvP. And we're not going to be changing the way those skills work in those. So Harbinger changes here. PvE only is going to be the first 2. Elixir of Bliss, again, similar as always, just going to be having its cooldown
these are
reduced
survivability
there.
changes in PvE.
And then
Okay.
also a little bit of
Except
protection
for
added across
Implacable
the
Foe.
board for Elixir of Ignorance. And then
That's
Implacable
fine.
Foe, going to be having damage reduction for a short duration when entering Harbinger Shroud. If you want to talk about that.
Yep,
Nico.
Who
we've
cares?
seen
Everything's immortal in
Harbinger,
PvE anyway.
in PvP specifically, both having less health from Blight and also not having Shroud is like a really big hindrance
Yes,
from your
it's
performance,
supposed to be.
especially in the higher tiers. So there's 2 changes here to help. Elixir of Ignorance is getting protection on it, just base.
Oh, okay.
So just having that source of protection that you can use, it's also a stun break. I'm pretty sure Elixir of Ignorance, that's a resistance
That's a
one.
lot worse.
That would
I
be
don't
like
know.
pretty good. An Implacable Foe, it's around 2 seconds of damage reduction for 50%. If people didn't know, when you're in like Death Shroud or
That's
Reaper
a
Shroud,
lot.
you have 50% damage reduction just naturally. And so this should kind of emulate that for when you go into Shroud. So people, you know, if you can see a burst coming and go into Shroud and mitigate a lot of it,
In Harbinger
it should hopefully
Shroud.
help skilled Harbingers mitigate a lot of the defenses they lose for being a Harbinger.
Absolutely.
I don't get this.
All right, moving on to Mesmer. We're going to be looking at some utility buffs for PvE, specifically defensive skills, as well as Power Virtuoso. Going to be getting some improvements.
Yeah,
this
because it
patch,
probably
specifically
stacks
for
with
PvE.
Marshall, the damage reduction. It
Build that
probably
we're not,
stacks
that
with
we
the
wanna see
protection
bumped
that
up a
they just
little
gave
bit
him as well, right?
A lot of condition
Reaper doesn't have
virtuoso, not as much
protection.
power.
Yep. These
Outside of that
Mesmer
one
changes.
utility skill.
The
Oh
first
my
2 are
God.
axes for PvP. Axe isn't really used a lot. Condition Mirage in general isn't used a lot. Condition Mirage is a build where
Hey, where's
kinda we
Remini?
always
Here's his
have
condition
like our
Mirage
eye on to make
buffs.
sure that it doesn't get out of control. But we felt like it was in a point where we could definitely touch
And
it
I
a
got
bit, bring
this.
it up. And axes specifically. So you're gonna see that the ambush are gonna be doing more damage, and you're gonna be able to use it 2 a bit more often. Then also, this is a game-wide change, but really helpful for competitive. Ether Feast is a heal that, you know, a lot of people don't take anymore. So we felt like if we put some condition cleanse on it, something Mesmers, you know, don't have a lot of access to, would be a pretty good buff. So this is
That's
1
a
condition
very good
plus
buff.
1 for each clone.
As
so
a
it's
Mesmer
like 1 to
player who's
4
also
based on how many,
getting
so it can be pretty
Tyrant
powerful
Amulet,
if used against condition builds.
that's an enormous
And then
buff,
the last few changes here are
actually.
just those utility changes we talked about.
Jesus Christ.
All right, this is actually my favorite
my.
page of the patch, the entire patch. Signet of Humility. Going to be getting some changes
No longer
to how
be
that skill
retargeted,
functions
so you
a
can't
little
start
bit.
casting it and then
So
target
you're now going to
something.
be required to have a target, so you can't necessarily precast it there. You also
That's
cannot
actually
target
great.
the skill. It has a big effect
Really?
above the target's
What's
head.
with
so
the
you know if
duration
you're
for
being
World
targeted
versus
with
World,
it,
not PvP?
as well as reducing the duration of when you get transformed into that MOA from 6 to 2 seconds in World versus World. So this is mostly aimed at people kind of single targeting commanders in World versus World and abusing that skill, but also just giving it a little bit better visual tell, a little bit more counterplay around the skill, since it is a very, very powerful skill in general in modes like PvP as well.
Yep, to give a bit of context what each of these little bits mean, the skill now plays an effect above its target's head. It means it's going to play the signet animation above your target, no matter how far away you are, or if you're in stealth. So stealth mowing now has a tell.
Or if you're in stealth.
Fortunate for you Mesmer
No,
players.
that does matter for PvP. It's still going to play the animation,
make sure that
Maddie.
this target is always accurate, it now requires a target and it can't be retargeted. So you can't like start the cast on someone and then swap over. If you start the cast on someone, that's who it's going to hit. And yeah, for World v World.
Yeah, no, it's bonkers in World
reducing
vs.
the
World, but
duration
they
to
don't
2
usually
seconds
bounce
just
around
because
roaming
we felt like in
engagements,
World v
Marshall.
World
It's weird.
specifically, the skill did
Yeah.
not serve a lot of purpose, but we really wanted to preserve its use in PvP specifically, and so we kept the mechanic. But we're making sure that if you get hit by a MO in World v World, you're not just going to die because people focus you and you can't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kill the bird.
And then, as we've seen, a bit of a common trend, a lot of cooldown reductions for a couple of skills that we're not really seeing being used very much.
This is such a boring patch, though. Sorry.
Veil, mental gymnastics, as well as number
Little
of
changes
volt
can have
stacks
big
going up for
impacts,
Elixir
though, so I'm not like
3 stacks
totally
to
checked
double
out on
there
it.
for PvE. All right, moving on to the Mirage and Vert changes. If you want to.
Yep. So the bigger one here is Infinite Forge is now going to give blade attacks damage
there's
bonus. So all
an
the effects
animation
that
for
are
core NG Moa.
same blade are going to get a strike
to
damage
throw the
bonus.
thing.
That should hopefully be the bump that Power Vert gives. To
Yeah,
be,
that's true. You can use it on
gets to be a
commanders.
competitive build.
That's fair. That's a fair point, Sword Dancer.
All right. All right, moving on to blue class.
Especially
As
if
we
you have
mentioned
marked.
earlier, shouldn't be a surprise anymore. The ward skills, as we're calling them, are going to be getting some same thing as Spectral Ring there for Necro, some quality of life there for PvE. We're looking at support firebrand being improved a little bit in PvE as well. It's a support spec that just hasn't really seen quite as much love as some of the other ones recently. And looking at some improvements to Valor, just to kind of try and give a little bit more synergy value there with Radiance. So maybe we
Firebrand hasn't seen improvements.
Meditation builds for Guardian being brought back a little bit again. Potentially even some core DPS builds potentially. But as we can see, their line of Warding, Ring of Warning, and Hunter's Ward, again, only in PvE, are going to have initial strikes that will be affecting Defiance bars. Again, same thing as Spectral Ring. Already went over that. And then some cooldown reduction for skills that we're not really seeing used in PvE on Guardian builds there for utility skills. Moving on, we get the Valor skills, or Valor traits, I should say. Focus Mastery and Munch Focus.
Cap,
we're going to be putting Resolution on them, again, just to give them some more synergy with Radiant Straight
I hope that always...
and kind of make, again, that meditation build that we haven't really seen being used very recently feel a little bit better. So Resolution when you use meditation skills, and Resolution when you're using focus skills. Focus Mastery, a trait that we're not really seeing being used often in any builds either. Just hopefully make that a little bit more competitive. And again, if you're looking for Resolution uptime, maybe you take that trait. And then for Dragon Hunter, only one change there. Fragments of Faith, again, cooldown reduction there for PvE.
Yep, Monk's focus here is intended to fill a hole. Guardian for the longest time now has been really balanced around the trait in Radiance that gives you crit chance when you have Resolution, but the only real consistent way to get Resolution was from Virtues, and using Virtues in that line. And so we're hopefully, with giving Resolution on meditation skill, maybe there's a chance that Guardians can drop Virtues for Valor now and still have
a really good
Resolution uptime for their Radiance traits, and feel better about taking meditations because now they have the damage.
That's a substantial change also for
All right, moving on to the Firebrand changes. So again, mostly going to be aimed at PvE. In fact, everything's going to be aimed at PvE. Looking at just, again, buffing up support Firebrand. So Might stacks are going to be going up. Might duration is going to be going up. We're going to be reducing some page costs for some of the more supportive skills on Firebrand. Again, aimed at just trying to make this support spec a little bit more competitive with some of the other supports in PvE.
Yep, Guardian has a lot of utility, and Firebrand had trouble squeezing all of it out when it wanted to, and also keep up healing compared to some other classes. So we're reducing page costs so that they can use the utility when they need to, but also have the pages for healing. As well as Daring Challenge is getting its taunt duration increase, which goes to, at the beginning, we showed that taunt was getting its defiance damage to match fear, so it's going from 75 damage to 200. So pretty good skill there. And as well, Lore Master is getting its page generation interval lowered to match PvP to go with, if you want more pages, Lore Master helps you get more pages even more now.
More pages more often.
Yep.
What's not to love?
What's
All right.
not to love?
So, moving on to Engineer. We've got Alchemy improvements, we've got PvE power adjustments, and we've got Elixir X, which is its own node, apparently.
Yeah. There you go.
Very big Elixir X fans in the chat, I'm sure. So, Healing Turret, not really seen very often in the competitive modes. Just going to reduce its cooldown a little bit. It is a pretty strong skill.
Used to be the only heal on NG.
I think sometime last year, make some changes to it to try and make it feel a little bit better to use. But we're still not really seeing it being used in PvP World versus World. World, especially where we do see obviously a lot of med kit usage. Not necessarily sure that this would take it over, but just trying to bump up that skill a little bit, make it feel a little bit more competitive. It is a pretty powerful skill on its own, so we don't really want to buff up the skill itself, but just some cooldown reduction there for the competitive modes.
Yep. Big personal battering ram change.
Yes.
Cal's not here, so I can make fun of him. He is convinced that personal battering ram is the correct utility to take on support engineer, and that's why we're lowering the cooldown. You can see here that we're reducing the launch distance to 0. That basically means they're going to go up, down instead of away from you. This is so we can safely reduce the cooldown without having to worry about decap NGs. Decap builds something we historically really hate, and so we're trying to make sure that they don't come back.
I was going to say, really
so it is really important. If you are planning on giving any feedback about the changes you've seen today, When you go and give your feedback, regardless of anything else you say, please let us know if Cal is either right about personal battering ram or wrong.
Decap NG is not the only decap class. Spellbreaker actually works better, and decap druid was in the game for like 3 months.
Absolutely.
So there's plenty of other decap builds.
There for
I don't know
Elixir
what
S,
this is
as
about.
well as for Elixir U.
Unless they're just memeing.
Some cooldown reduction as well for Elixir U in the competitive mode. Just going to be having a little bit
question.
less.
PvP. Yeah, I guess it is only in PvP.
And then we've got some of the
still back in World versus World. I didn't know they could split.
In PvP and World versus World.
Skills like that, Marshall.
Stability being a little bit more important in World versus World specifically. You're going to have that duration going down in that mode only.
Yep.
More utility skill changes here, as well as some tool belt skills. Toolkit skills. So cooldown reduction there for utility. Utility goggles.
Oh my God!
Magic
Magnet finally plays its full animation.
This is obviously a skill that doesn't really do much in PvE specifically. And so, it's a little harder to take utility goggles. It has a very niche use. Well, not necessarily niche use, but it has some use in some of the more competitive modes if you're playing against players who can utilize stealth. And, so we do see it used sometimes there, but we're not really seeing it used in PvE. So now maybe inflicting vulnerability will allow you to feel a little bit better about taking utility goggles, especially with the cooldown reduction, as it is a pretty strong skill just in general. And then
just say
some toolkit.
It has some utility in competitive modes, but they're not changing utility goggles.
Magnet is getting a similar treatment to MOA, just because it had the same kind of problems that MOA did in World v World. That this is a long-range CC and can really be used to pull people out of position. It didn't have a great tell, so now we're playing the full visual effect over its channel, and then it also can't be retargeted. But to also buff it in PvE, because it's CC, it was a pretty long cast for pretty bad CC, so it's going to do some bonus defiance damage. So hopefully Toolkit is looking pretty good as a kit. Have a pretty big hit from Prybar, throw a wrench, also pretty good. Have a block on it, always great. And now Magnet
Toolkit used to be really good.
So pretty well-rounded kit, I would say.
Absolutely. All right. So this is, of course, I think what is now going to be everyone's favorite page, Elixir X.
Mine.
Yeah, it certainly is. Elixir X is going to have a chance to transform the user into a lich.
Right.
So this is obviously going to be the skill that
basically nothing but PvE
changes
because
tornado or the rampage form of Warrior's Elite Rampage. So we're going to be now changing it to have basically a 1/3 chance to transform you into one of those two or a lich. The idea being that a lot of the times especially in competitive modes
1/4
or PvP you'd really be.
It seems like an engineer patch because this is the first actual functionality change.
So we are lowering the chance to get that a little bit, but we're also lowering the chance to get Tornado a little bit, and giving you a pretty strong utility skill or a pretty strong, powerful skill in the form of Lich. Adds a little bit more flavor to the skill, adds a little bit potential more usability, changes up how maybe that skill can be used, and play it around a little bit. Just make it a little bit more fun and exciting instead of just nerfing the skill, or rather nerfing the chance to get Tornado.
I mean, yeah, the biggest reason was why not?
Why not?
Yeah. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah, you also see on this page we're increasing grenade damage a bit in PvE. There was a bug fix to make it so kits are not supposed to proc Relic of the Firework in anywhere, and so we fixed that, and that made these skills not exactly worth using anymore. So we're trying to buff them up in compensation. It's kind of like a trade here. You'll see when we get onto Hollowsmith, we're hopefully not nerfing it that much, but shifting its power budget.
It probably is a terrible
grenade and
placeholder Fury Miner.
But if we move on down to the last 2 points here, we see that we're changing alchemy a bit. Compounding chemicals is getting a function that it used to have back. It used to cleanse conditions. It was removed. Now it's back. That's pretty big because in competitive we see that tools is pretty good at removing conditions, and that's a big part of NG is having that sustain there. And so by putting it in alchemy, we're hopefully giving them some different ways that they can play engineer. This also goes along with, you'll see emergency elixirs being reworked to boiling point, where you will gain fury when you gain might at or above the threshold. When you're playing alchemy, you have a lot of might, HGH and everything. And so hopefully it should be a pretty consistent fury access, which is another thing we saw in competitive. When you want to play grenade alchemy as a common build, you really lack fury.
It says 15 seconds,
fury trait
Marshall, but it actually works correctly.
And so hopefully having fury access here should make it feel pretty good to go grenade elixirs as you did before, and bring that build back, because that was one people enjoyed a lot.
Absolutely. And here in the Hollowsmith, changes that Taylor sort of just mentioned, where, you know, in compensation for buffing some of the other tools that Hollowsmith or Engineer can bring, we are lowering some of the damage bonuses from heat in PvE.
Yep.
Surprised they didn't
pretty
nerf
big number. A bit of an overshoot, so we're
the
bringing it down to
overheat trait
35.
again.
But, you know, we're buffing grenades back, so deal.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously something we'll keep an eye on. As Taylor mentioned, you know, we don't want to just completely nerf the build, nuke it out of existence. And that is certainly not what we're trying to do here. So if we do overshoot on some of the numbers, we will be keeping an eye on it, making sure that it is still a strong choice. But I believe that will bring us to our final class, Elementalist. If anyone was paying attention, we did kind of go opposite. It was opposite day. We went opposite alphabetical order. Saving Elementalist for last, best for last. Actually, the main reason we do this is just because Cal always wants us to do Elementalist first, and so this is a little bit of a protest there. While he's not here, he doesn't have control over us. So, looking at Elementalist, we've got some power updates for Scepter in PvE. We've got some usability improvements for Dagger and Staff, and then we've got some specifically Tempest and Earth specialization improvements overall. Here we can see the Tempest or the Scepter changes. Go ahead.
These are the Scepter changes. When Pistol came out, a lot of people were confused. They're like, we already have a Condi weapon. But Scepter in the competitive modes is a power weapon mostly. And so we wanted it to reflect that in PvE as well, but its power numbers were just really outdated and not good. So we're buffing all of them. Here you'll see these are a lot of auto attacks and 2 skills. We're buffing the auto attacks, and you'll see we're buffing the Weaver ones because we feel like Weaver will be the one most likely to take use of Scepter. So you see that all the auto attacks are getting buffed. Water Trident also getting buffed, and then we go to the. Actually, next slide is still core, but you'll see Weaver's getting buffed.
Yeah, Weaver's gonna be.
These are Dagger, so swapping gears, Dagger also has been kind of not used a lot. So we're taking a look at it. You'll see Drake's Breath and Cone of Cold getting the same casting time reduction. You know, it felt pretty sluggish nowadays to be casting for over 2 seconds. So we're
I can't hear you over the sound of my dragon
also
trigger.
increasing the damage a bit on Drake's Breath and increasing the healing on Cone of Cold. And then also looking at Dagger, we're giving it even more blast finishers. Convergence is going to be a blast finisher. Frozen Burst is going to create an ice field before performing its blast finisher. So you're going to see that you'll make an ice field, then you'll blast it naturally, kind of like how Mesmer Rifle 3 blasts itself naturally. And then Ring of Earth, Earth and Rush also getting some little tweaks to hopefully make Dagger more competitive in all game modes.
Absolutely. And here we got some of the staff skills, as well as, again, some just utility skill cooldown reductions there for PvE, but similar sort of deal in PvE as we saw with the Guardian Wards. The Spectral Ring on Necro is that static field, and Steady Ground are going to be performing that initial strike. That will deal some Defiance damage for PvE. Again, only PvE changes there for the staffs. But here we go. So going on to some of these Earth changes, and this is a little bit of the reason why we added some more blast finisher usability on Dagger.
They're also nerfing Crossbar in World vs.
Earth
World.
Embrace trait has been reworked. Gain resistance after using healing skill. Earth and Blast. This trait now grants barrier to the user in addition to its other effects. Barrier not be granted when attuning to the same element. And Diamond Skin is now going to remove a condition from yourself and allies when you successfully combo field with a blast finisher. So that's going to be ally Condi Cleanse for blasts, and then it'll be self Condi Cleanse when you
I actually really like that change. I actually really like that change.
In World vs. World, we don't really see support Ellie, specifically Tempest, being brought quite as often. Ever since we started buffing up things like Druid, Scrapper's become a little bit, back into the meta.
Stop leaning on resistance and barrier so much, but hey,
and so, we don't want to just
I actually really like that.
Kind of buff the same things that Tempest were using previously. We want to try to give it a little bit more options. We want to try to see if going into Earth, and taking the things that Earth already gave you, as well as now what we're buffing here and changing with Earth, gives Elementalist, gives Tempest a little bit more options. Cleanse obviously being something that Tempest, was competitive with before and now has fallen behind a little bit. So this will give you more cleanse, especially if you combo, with the Dagger updates, the Dagger changes we're doing, the Dagger buffs we're doing for World vs. World, could be a pretty strong build. We're going to see how that plays out.
Yep.
Some water trait line updates.
Yeah, you can't take.
You want to take those?
Yep. Soothing Ice should be a pretty good
alright, Earth Grandmaster.
change.
You're right, Marshall.
Its passive trigger made it so we had to
good.
put a pretty decent ICD on it, but now that it is not passive, we can reduce it and increase usability a lot. And having that aura on heal, especially with Tempest, should feel pretty good. Flow like water, increasing the damage bonuses here,
There's a
so
damage
that
bonus trait in the
there
water
are
trait
some
line.
like traits in Waterline that are a bit bruisery.
Yeah.
But the numbers on them just aren't there, so we're trying to increase them there. Soothing power also kind of going along with
What's
that.
soothing
If you want to take
power?
Waterline for just like I guess selfish reasons, for personal survivability. Soothing power was kind of like the Grandmaster you had to go with, but didn't feel really good. So we're just tacking on 300 vitality to it to match like Force of Will
Okay,
on
it's
Guardian.
the mist thing. It's not one they get
and
by
hopefully people
default.
feel
Thank
better by
God.
taking the
I
trait
was
now.
like, that's fine. No, I thought so too, Maddie. It's the double the effectiveness
Moving
of
on
mist
to
thing.
Tempest.
That's fine.
Yeah, so Overload Air.
If you have to spec into
gonna be
that, that's a good
getting
trait.
Pretty strong, pretty big buff there for PvE, which is now going to grant feared allies, but also,
I
potentially
like
more importantly,
a lot of the
big
LA changes they do because
coming
they
up
seem
here.
really
Big power
reserved because
coefficient
Cal
buff
is
from,
aware of how
0.715
powerful
to
LA can be.
0.951. Again, this is PvE only. Just to kind of try and make that Overload Air feel
They make a lot of
better
changes
there
that
for
like
Tempest in PvE.
make sense.
Yep. This is
That aren't like super OP a lot of the time.
old
that
build,
one Catalyst season
fresh
notwithstanding.
air overload Tempest used to be a thing. It's not anymore. And some people want the build back, so we're trying to make it a bit more viable. As well, you see it grants Fury to allies now. Fury was a boon that Tempest support was pretty awkward with. To copy it with heatsink, you had to have someone really give it to you before you had like convergence to give it to you, but it wasn't really great. So the next 3 changes are all hopefully in really getting Tempest a lot better Fury access to its party. You also see we're increasing the might it gives a bit from Feel the Burn to help build might generation, especially if you're playing staff, maybe you don't have heatsink accessible to you. Feel the Burn and blasting those fire fields should hopefully carry might a lot harder now. And then these last 2 also just help out Tempest a bit.
Yeah, all of these
more
make
AoE
sense.
protection with Hardy Conduit.
I wish
so
there was the
maybe
quality of these
aren't using
changes
the
on
Earth Straight Line,
literally
you
every
don't have
class.
Prominent Aura, you can have another way to give prot to
Go
people.
buy gems so
from
they
that.
can hire more balanced
and
devs, chat.
focus. We're just reducing the additional text. Now it just gives concentration, kind of like other trades in our game.
Absolutely. All right, here are the Weaver, excuse me.
Here are the Weaver juices.
The Weaver juices that Taylor was looking for earlier.
Yep. So these are all just, they had a number's bigger now. Earth and Synergy.
Well, actually, Plasma Beam has a smaller number. Taylor, I don't know if you know this, but 15 is in fact
But the smaller
smaller
number
than
here
18.
is better number.
Okay.
It's good. It's a good small. So Weaver should maybe have an interesting rotation with Scepter. You probably don't want to dual attune to like air like you do on Sword.
Evenly
the blinding
exciting / disappointing Marshall. It's mostly PvE
water
stuff.
Has Water Trident, pretty good skill. So maybe you want to like dual attune on water if you want to dual attune to it. And so swapping through the attunements.
I think Maddie's right. I think this is prep for the new expansion.
And yeah, we see Earth and Synergy getting its damage reduced, kind of like Prelude Lash did. These were kind of holdovers from a long time ago when we made CC not do damage in competitive modes. These were a bit like overlooked. So we're kind of like cleaning that up now.
Absolutely. And to wrap it up, we've got some cooldown
all
reductions on some skills for PvE on Weaver.
Honestly, the bigger PvP patch was the one that I didn't cover with the Tuesday changes because I thought they were going to have a bigger follow-up today, but they just didn't. So maybe I'll make a video on that. I don't know. It's kind of late, but go look at those changes. They're like way more involved
honestly,
than this.
Pretty
no
speedy
Blades
run
one
through
slide.
there. I think we can all agree that Cal was really just slowing us down. And, you know, I'm sure... Too much yapping. All of his insights and expositions and tangents, you know, not really that important or useful. No one really wants to know why Cal does what he does. Of course, I'm kidding. But yes, he will be back once again for the next stream before anyone loses their mind about wondering where Cal is. But just to recap, as always, the notes that you just saw. Especially the
PvP's getting
notes,
2 new
which
amulets.
we
I'm
really
excited about that.
Of course, that's my fault.
Maybe they don't want to adjust stuff too much
posted
before those drop.
at the end of the stream, which is about to conclude.
It's worth it, Marshall.
And please make sure you give us your feedback on the notes that you saw. Again, we'll be looking over those or for that feedback, especially over this weekend, but just in general, we'll be making sure to read, you know, our various sources of feedback gathering as we move forward.
They mess with each other, Maddie.
Thank you very much for tuning in and watching. And yeah, I think any final words there, Taylor?
I'll see you guys in the mists.
That sounds more like something you'd say if you were like ending a stream. Not really final words.
Turn it off.
And you're not ending the stream. I'm ending the stream. I still have that power. It doesn't matter if you're at the head of the chair now that Cal is gone forever. I still can.
Never coming back.
We probably should actually just, I think, sit here for 14
locked out of
minutes
teams.
and make sure we get
They've
extended all
taken
the way
away
to the hour.
privileges.
Excuse me. Yes. All right. We will be ending the stream there. And Taylor, if you really do want to, you can do the outro. I'll let you do it this time.
Stay safe, gamers. We'll see you in the mists.
All right, everyone. Until next time, I lied. We'll see you in the mists. Have a lovely day. Take care, everyone. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
I got some final words, chat. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna go rewind so I can actually read the warrior patch notes. That was technically a balanced stream that we just watched, right? I have no input on that. I don't know. I'm gonna go post the gif of my blade sworn projectiles totally hitting people in PvP on the forums and then go hit the gym. So, if you like this, subscribe for more. Go rewind the VOD so you can actually read the warrior changes, and I'll be back on Monday with the usual world versus world roaming. Shrug. I'll see you in the mists, guys. Peace out.